There comes a moment in a woman's life, often after decades of caring, giving, surviving, and striving, when she begins to feel something quietly changing within. It isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's a subtle whisper, a sense that life is asking for something deeper, something truer. Perhaps you felt it too, that soft ache behind the smile. The desire to stop pretending, to rest, to finally understand who you really are beneath all the roles you've played. You see, awakening isn't about gaining something new. It's about remembering what was always there. The quiet awareness behind every laughter line, every heartbreak, every sleepless night. But for many, this awakening feels unbearable, because before the light comes in, everything false must fall away. Tonight, as you listen, I invite you to let your heart exhale, to let go of the noise, the rush, the expectation of always being strong. This space, right here, is for you. If these words touch you, if they remind you that you are not alone, consider subscribing, liking, or sharing your reflection in the comments. Your voice, your presence, your story, they matter. So take a deep breath. Feel the quiet within your chest. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Gentle Collapse of Certainty. Have you ever noticed how life begins to whisper louder when the noise of certainty fades away? There comes a time when what once felt solid, your beliefs, your plans, your identity, begins to soften at the edges. It's as if life itself has been patiently waiting for you to finally pause and listen. For most of your years, you might have lived by patterns. You knew what to do, when to do it, and how to hold everyone together. You built a rhythm, a safety, a sense of control. But awakening doesn't honor control. It honors surrender. It begins, not in the brightness of revelation, but in the gentle unraveling of who you thought you were. And this is where most people turn away. They feel the ground shifting beneath their feet in panic. They cling to familiar pain rather than face the unfamiliar peace waiting on the other side. They mistake the collapse for destruction, not knowing that it's simply life rearranging itself in truth. You may feel it too, that strange sense of loss without a clear reason. The sudden tears for things you thought you had already healed. The quiet evenings where you sit with yourself and wonder, what is happening to me? This is awakening. Not the kind the books romanticize. No thunder, no angels, no grand epiphany, but a soft undoing. The kind that humbles the mind and opens the soul. You begin to notice your thoughts, not as truths, but as weather patterns, passing, temporary, and often unreliable. You realize that the person you've always tried to be was never real, just a collection of expectations stitched together by the world. And now, slowly, those threads begin to loosen. It can feel lonely, unbearably so. Because few understand this stage. Many will tell you to stay positive, to just move on, not realizing that awakening asks you not to move, but to be still. There's a sacred kind of falling that happens here, not into despair, but into truth. The truth that you are not the stories told about you. You are not the roles you've played. You are not even the thoughts that describe you. When you begin to see this, something inside you sighs with relief. You realize you've spent most of your life being the guardian of an illusion, protecting a self-image that never truly existed. And so, life gently begins to dismantle what is false. A friend may leave, a plan may fail, a part of your body may ache. Each event, though painful, carries an invisible invitation. Can you trust this too? Can you surrender to what's happening even when it doesn't make sense? This is why most people cannot handle their spiritual awakening, because it feels like losing everything. But you, dear listener, are learning something deeper, that losing everything false is not a tragedy. It is grace in disguise. You are beginning to understand that your worth was never dependent on what stayed, but on what you could finally let go of. So, as your certainty collapses, don't rush to rebuild it. Sit among the ruins. Feel the quiet beauty of the unknown. The pieces that remain, those are real. Life is not punishing you. It's simply peeling away the layers that no longer serve your truth. And if tears come, let them. If silence stretches, honor it. If loneliness visits, sit beside it, like an old friend who has something important to say. In this space of undoing, You are not falling apart. You are falling into yourself. The awakening doesn't destroy. It reveals. It shows you what you are beneath the noise. A soul vast enough to hold both the storm and the stillness. And as you breathe, gently, slowly, you might begin to feel a peace that doesn't depend on answers, only on presence. Chapter 2. The Pain of Letting Go and the Grace Within. How do you release something that once held you together? A name, a marriage, a dream, a version of yourself you spent years building. Letting go is one of life's most misunderstood acts. It isn't a single moment of courage. It's a long unfolding, like petals surrendering to the sun. And yet, when awakening begins, letting go becomes inevitable, because truth has no interest in what's comfortable, only in what's real. For women who have carried the weight of others for so long, this can feel almost impossible. You've been the nurturer, the listener, the one who holds space for everyone else's storms. And now life asks you to turn inward, to hold space for your own. At first, it may feel selfish. You might feel guilty for needing rest, for saying no, for allowing silence to replace the endless doing. But remember, your peace is not a luxury. It is the soil from which everything true can grow. The pain of letting go is not punishment. It's purification. Each tear that falls is a thread loosening, the tight weave of what you thought you had to be. Each moment of emptiness is the heart expanding to fit its original size again. When you stop chasing what's gone, you begin to notice what never left, the stillness, the awareness, the quiet companionship of your own soul. You might notice how, for years, your happiness depended on things outside you, a kind word, a partner's presence, a child's gratitude, the validation of being needed. And now, those very attachments begin to shift. They start to feel heavy. They ache to be released, not because they were wrong, but because they have completed their purpose. Life is asking you to love differently now, not through grasping, but through openness. Not through fear of loss, but through trust in the flow. The truth is, you never really lose anyone or anything that was meant to stay in your soul's journey. You only release what your spirit has outgrown. Think of the tree in autumn. The leaves fall, not because the tree is dying, but because it is preparing to rest, to renew, to make space for what's next. The tree doesn't resist. It doesn't mourn the color it once wore. It simply lets go, and yet we humans, we cling. We cling because we believe the falling means we're failing. But awakening whispers you are not losing. You are transforming. When you let go of what is no longer aligned with your truth, you don't become less. You become whole. This is where the grace begins to appear. In the pauses between tears, in the silence after goodbye, in the breath that says, I am still here. There is a quiet miracle hidden inside letting go, the realization that you don't need to control everything to be okay. When you stop forcing, life begins flowing. When you stop holding on, you are held by something larger. Call it God, call it source, call it love. It doesn't need your effort. It needs your trust. Most people never reach this place because they mistake surrender for defeat. But you are starting to see the difference. You are learning that surrender is not giving up. It's giving in to the rhythm of life, to the wisdom of your own becoming. So tonight, if you are holding something tightly, a memory, a pain, a dream that once felt like home, whisper to it softly, thank you. Then, let it rest. Let the space it leaves behind fill with breath, with light, with the quiet grace of a woman who is no longer afraid to be free. Because this very letting go, is not your ending. It's your awakening. Chapter 4. When the mind finally lets go. The quiet power of acceptance. What happens when you stop fighting with life? When you no longer argue with what is and instead simply allow it to be? There is a peace that doesn't come from control. It comes from acceptance. And yet the human mind is trained to resist this truth. For decades, perhaps your mind has whispered, if only things were different. If only I had more time, more love, more certainty. But awakening teaches a softer lesson, that peace does not arrive when everything changes. It arrives when you do. It's a strange shift, isn't it? You spend so many years believing your happiness depends on the outer world, the job, the relationship, the approval, the outcome. And then one day life pauses and says, no, happiness was never out there. It's been resting quietly here, inside you, waiting to be noticed. But before you can feel that peace, the mind has to loosen its grip. And that can feel terrifying. The mind is like a river that's been flowing fast for years. It has learned to rush, to analyze, to plan, to control. When you try to quiet it, it protests. It says, if I stop thinking, I'll disappear. But you, dear one, are not your thoughts. You are the space in which they rise and fade. You are the calm riverbank, not the current. The art of awakening is not about silencing the mind by force. It's about watching it gently, seeing its patterns, its fears, its constant need to grasp, until one day you no longer identify with it. You stop being dragged by the current and start sitting beside it, watching the flow. Acceptance is born here, not as resignation, but as understanding. When you truly accept life, you stop demanding that it fit your image of how it should be. You stop trying to fix yourself and instead begin to listen. You begin to see that every experience, even the painful ones, has been part of your unfolding. A divine choreography leading you back to the truth of who you are. For many women in their later years, this realization arrives like a soft dawn. After decades of striving for love, for approval, for perfection, you begin to realize that nothing was ever missing. Life didn't need to be mastered. It only needed to be met. When the mind finally lets go, something magical happens. You begin to see beauty where you once saw burden. You start to notice the stillness between moments, the silence between words. You begin to understand that what you once called imperfection was simply the raw poetry of life unfolding exactly as it should. Think of the ocean. The waves rise and fall, not because they are broken, but because that is their nature. You too rise and fall, in joy, in sadness, in laughter, in tears. Nothing is wrong. Everything is movement. Everything is rhythm. Alan Watts once said, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." But how often do we truly allow ourselves to simply be? No judgment, no striving, no comparison, just this breath, this moment. Acceptance is not the end of growth. It is the soil in which true growth begins. Because only when you accept the moment as it is, do you free yourself from the illusion that peace is elsewhere. And perhaps as you sit in that quiet understanding, you'll begin to smile, not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. You'll find yourself breathing deeper. You'll find gratitude in the smallest details. The way the morning light touches the floor, the softness of your favorite chair, the quiet pulse of your own heart. This is awakening in its simplest form, not the escape from life, but the embrace of it. Not control, but trust. Not striving, but being. When the mind finally lets go, it doesn't fall into emptiness. It falls into love, the kind that doesn't depend on anything, that doesn't demand, that simply is. And in that quiet, steady love, you remember who you've always been. Not a role, not a title, not an idea, but a presence. A soul resting in the gentle rhythm of being alive. Chapter 5. The Second Awakening. When you begin to see through the eyes of peace. Have you ever noticed that awakening doesn't happen all at once? It comes in layers. First the unraveling, then the silence, and then something softer. A second awakening. This second awakening is not dramatic. It doesn't arrive with lightning or revelation. It appears quietly, often in the middle of an ordinary moment, a morning cup of tea, a gentle breeze through the window, the sound of your own laughter after a long time. It's the moment you realize you are no longer fighting life. You've stopped asking, "Why me?" and begun whispering, "Thank you." This is where peace begins to take root. You see, the first awakening, the collapse, breaks down illusions. The second awakening rebuilds something truer, something timeless. It teaches you to look at the world not through fear, but through wonder. You begin to see that everything, even the pain, was a teacher. The heartbreak softened your pride. The loneliness deepened your empathy. The uncertainty taught you trust. Every moment, even the difficult ones, was shaping you into someone capable of love without conditions. And then, you start to feel it. That subtle hum beneath everything. A sense that all is connected. The leaves, the rain, your breath, your memories, your aging hands, the people you've loved and lost. All part of one great rhythm playing itself through you. It's as if the veil has thinned and you begin to see with different eyes. The eyes of peace. The eyes that no longer judge, no longer divide, no longer rush. This is not detachment. It's presence. It's the deep knowing that nothing needs to be fixed in order for it to be beautiful. Many women describe this stage as a quiet homecoming. After a lifetime of giving, striving, worrying, and hoping, you find yourself standing still, not empty, but full. Full of perspective, full of gratitude, full of life as it is. You stop measuring your worth by the world's standards and start measuring it by the softness of your heart. The mind may still chatter, but you no longer believe every word it says. It becomes background noise, like distant waves you can hear but no longer drown in. The emotions may still rise, but they no longer define you. You can feel anger without becoming anger. You can feel sadness without believing it will last forever. This is freedom, not escape from the world, but freedom within it. You start to notice beauty where others see ordinary. You hear music in the silence. You find sacredness in small acts, the morning walk, the scent of rain, the wrinkles that tell your story. You stop chasing enlightenment and realize it was never somewhere else. It was always here, beneath the noise of doing, in the simple act of being. In this second awakening, forgiveness also becomes easier. Not because people suddenly deserve it, but because you no longer wish to carry the burden of resentment. You begin to see that everyone, even those who hurt you, were doing the best they could from their own level of awareness. And you bless them, quietly, without needing to understand. Forgiveness is not about them. It's about freeing yourself to love again. Alan Watts once said, "We do not come into this world. We come out of it." You begin to understand what that means. You are not a visitor here. You are the universe, looking at itself through human eyes. That is the second awakening. The shift from, "Why is this happening to me?" to, "This is happening through me." You realize that you are both the wave and the ocean, temporary yet eternal, soft yet vast. So tonight, if your heart feels quiet, if you sense a stillness that has no name, don't rush past it. That is peace. That is life speaking in its truest language. That is the soul finally resting in its own understanding. And as you breathe, you might notice something profound. The world hasn't changed. You have. You have begun to see through the eyes of peace. And once you see like this, you can never unsee. Chapter 6, Living Awake. Walking the earth with a soft heart. What does it mean to live awake? Not just to understand awakening, but to embody it, to move through life with grace, to speak gently even when the world shouts, to see beauty even when the day feels heavy. Living awake is not a performance. It is simplicity. It is presence woven into every gesture, every breath, every small act of kindness. You've walked through the fire of awakening, the collapse, the silence, the surrender. You've faced your loneliness, released your past, and discovered peace in the stillness. Now, life invites you to carry that peace into motion. This is where awakening becomes art. The art of living softly in a hard world. The art of listening before responding. The art of choosing compassion instead of reaction. When you live awake, you begin to sense the subtle energy behind every moment. You feel when a conversation needs silence rather than words. You notice when your body asks for rest instead of effort. You begin to trust your intuition. That quiet wisdom that has been whispering beneath the noise all along. It's as if life begins speaking through you instead of to you. Every breath, every movement, every heartbeat feels like participation in something vast and sacred. You no longer rush to change others. You allow them their timing, their lessons, their own rhythm of awakening. Because you remember what it was like to be asleep and how patient life was with you. This patience becomes your power. You no longer meet pain with resistance, but with compassion. You no longer meet uncertainty with fear, but with curiosity. You no longer meet endings with despair, but with reverence. Living awake means realizing that everything, even sorrow, has its own music. And you are learning to dance to it all. Sometimes people will look at you and say, "You've changed." And you'll smile because what they really mean is, you've stopped pretending. You no longer chase validation because you've found something more enduring, inner harmony. This doesn't mean you'll never feel sadness again. Awakening doesn't erase emotion. It softens your relationship with it. You can now hold sadness like a child, tenderly without judgment. You can sit beside anger and ask, "What are you trying to teach me?" You can let joy fill you without fearing it will fade. Everything is welcome. Nothing is rejected. That's the beauty of living awake. You become vast enough to hold it all, and with this openness comes a new kind of strength. Not the rigid strength of survival, but the fluid strength of wisdom. You learn that softness is not weakness. It's power refined through love. It's the ability to remain kind in an unkind world, to forgive when others forget, to see light even when shadows linger. You start noticing small miracles, not grand, miraculous events, but the simple ones that life hides in plain sight. The taste of morning coffee, the sound of rain against your window, the warmth of a familiar song. You realize that enlightenment isn't found in mountaintops or sacred texts. It's in the way you pour your tea, the way you listen, the way you breathe. This is the quiet revolution of living awake. You bring sacredness into the ordinary. You make life itself your meditation. Alan Watts once said, "You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself." And now, you feel that truth deeply. Every glance, every kindness, every heartbeat, it's all the universe seeing itself through your eyes. When you live awake, gratitude becomes your natural language. Not forced, not practiced, just effortless appreciation for the privilege of being here at all. You see, it was never about becoming more. It was always about remembering who you already are, and so you walk this earth not as someone searching, but as someone seeing the sacredness in every step, every breath, every imperfection that makes this moment complete. You walk with a soft heart, not because life is easy, but because you have finally understood it. Chapter 7. Coming Home to Yourself. The eternal stillness within, and so, after all the searching, after all the losing and finding, the questioning and surrendering, you return to yourself. Not the self the world asked you to be, but the one that has been quietly waiting behind every breath. Coming home to yourself is not dramatic. It's not a single epiphany or a moment of perfection. It's more like the slow settling of dust after a long journey. It's the moment your shoulders drop and you finally exhale, realizing that there is nowhere else to go. Because you were never truly lost. You begin to see that everything you've lived, every joy, every heartbreak, was leading you here, to this softness, to this silence, to this gentle knowing that life was never against you. It was always trying to awaken you. Home is not a place outside of you. It's the stillness beneath your thoughts. It's the peace that hums quietly behind every emotion. It's the part of you that never changes, even as the world shifts around you. When you sit in that space, that pure awareness, you feel something ancient stirring. A remembrance, a recognition, the understanding that you were never the pain you carried. You were the light that witnessed it. This is what awakening leads to, not escape, but intimacy. An intimacy with existence so profound that even your breathing feels sacred. You start to sense that you and life are no longer separate, that you are being lived not by will but by love. You no longer seek answers. You no longer need explanations, because in this stillness, everything already makes sense. The questions dissolve. Why did it happen? Why did they leave? Why did I have to hurt so much? And in their place arises a quiet acceptance, a whisper that says, because it taught me to see. As you rest in this inner home, you notice how simple peace truly is. It doesn't depend on circumstances. It doesn't require perfection. It exists here, now, in the space between heartbeats. For women who have walked decades through the storms of life, this realization feels like grace. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to earn rest. You have become the calm you once sought. This is not the end of awakening. It's the beginning of true living. A life no longer driven by fear, but guided by awareness. A heart no longer guarded, but open. You begin to walk differently, slower, gentler, as if each step is an act of gratitude. You listen differently, hearing not just words but the silence beneath them. You love differently, not from need, but from overflow. And as this stillness deepens, something subtle yet profound happens. You stop needing to be understood, because you understand yourself. You understand that not everyone will see your light, and that's okay. You understand that peace doesn't mean a perfect life. It means a peaceful heart within whatever life brings. You understand that love is not something to be found, but something you already are. You understand that awakening was never about becoming spiritual. It was about becoming real. And so, the journey that began with unraveling ends in wholeness. The pain that once broke you now blesses you. The solitude that once ached now soothes you. The silence that once frightened you now feels like home. Because you, dear soul, have come full circle. You have walked through the fire and found water. You have faced your shadows and discovered light. You have met yourself, not as an image, but as truth. And now, when you look into the mirror, you no longer see the weight of years. You see wisdom. You see resilience. You see the quiet beauty of a woman who has learned to live awake. So, let the world move as it will. Let time do what time must. You are no longer chasing. You are no longer searching. You have arrived, here, in this eternal moment. Whole. Enough. Home. And as you breathe, one final truth rises like dawn within your heart. When you finally understand yourself, you stop needing to be understood.